In the week between races, it was Australia's turn to go to the polls, and just as in Britain a few weeks earlier, the incumbent party was re-elected, in this case Bob Hawke's Labour Party. Despite leading in the polls for most of the time since the last election in 1984, John Howard's Liberal National Coalition was racked by infighting and was unable to convert it into votes. On the same day as the election, the UN estimated that the world population had reached 5 billion, picking out Matej Gaspar, born in Zagreb, Yugoslavia, as the symbolic 5 billionth human. The 4 billion landmark had been reached in 1974, and it would only take 11 more years to reach 6 billion in 1998. It seemed at times as if most of those 5 billion were at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, with so-called Mansell mania reaching a crescendo after Nigel's narrow failure to capture the title last year and the prospect of him going top of the table after his win in France last week. The British Grand Prix had been held at Brands Hatch last year, but this was the first of a 5-year stint at Silverstone under the FIA policy of long-term contracts over alternating arrangements, and the track's layout had been amended in the meantime. The little woodcut chicane had been removed, though the corresponding kink in the pit lane remained, and a more substantial complex at Bridge substituted to slow the cars into the fast woodcut corner. The drivers went out to have a go at the new circuit in fine weather, and to no one's great surprise it was the Williams team who were once again setting the pace, whole seconds ahead of everybody else. Zaxby's were ostentatiously practising tyre change drills after the fiasco at Paul Ricard, and the Ford engineers had detuned the V6 turbos in the back of the Benettons a little to improve reliability. Piercarlo Ghinzani ran out of fuel on the start-finish straight during Saturday's qualifying session, and the team hopped over the wall with a can of petrol to top him up, and then he ignored the end of session flags to get one more lap in, so he found himself disqualified from the rest of the meeting. A baffling series of errors from experienced team and experienced driver alike. Elsewhere, it was Gerard Larousse's birthday, and the former Renault team manager invited his old buddies Alain Prost and René Arnoux over to cut the cake with him and Philippe Alliot. Nelson Piquet seemed determined to spoil Mansell's party and reassert himself as team leader, and was fastest in both sessions, albeit by just 7/10, to take his first pole of the year, with Mansell alongside after another tyre blowout. Senna was third, a full second behind Mansell, with Prost the top non-Honda in fourth. Then came the Benettons and Ferraris, with De Cesaris and Johansson rounding out the top 10. Nakajima in the second Lotus was 12th, then came the Arrowses, and Nannini once again doing well in the Minardi. Brundle and Dana started on row 9, with Campos and Caffey the last of the turbo runners, and the 3.5 litre men bringing up the rear again on this power-heavy circuit. Pascal Fabre at the back once again, just over 11 seconds off Piquet's time. Sunday was also sunny, and along came the usual parade of support events and entertainments, and while Prost had won at the last two Silverstone races, it looked unlikely that he would make it a hat-trick here, while Mansell would be hoping to add his name to the 5 previous British winners of the British Grand Prix at Silverstone: Peter Collins, Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, James Hunt and John Watson. Nigel had of course won twice in front of his home fans already, but both times at Brands Hatch. While the fans in the stands were hoping for a great battle between Piquet and Mansell, meanwhile, both Frank Williams and Honda were stressing to them that they were not to jeopardise a potential easy 1-2 win.
The two drivers do not get on particularly well, but they're very competitive individuals. The fact that they're thrown together in the same team, which is unusual, means that they maybe resent the fact that they have to try and beat the other chap the whole time. But in a way it's healthy. It's difficult for me to control.
Whatever the tensions behind the scenes, though, both Nigel and Nelson looked relaxed and happy on the grid in conversation with the BBC coverage team.
Big one, not a little one, a big one.
Did you think at that time, Nelson, you'd thrown away this pole position?
No, I still have one set of tire left. I still have the spare car, and I stop here. Let the one car jump on another one and try again. I think for my 10 years I have in Formula One, I know exactly that you have to fight until the last minute. You know, sometime you make, sometime you don't.
Nigel, a great occasion, isn't it?
It's fabulous, isn't it? Lovely to be in England again.
What does this crowd mean to you, Nigel?
I mean, everything. Just watch them. Come on. Thank you.
Anyone would think they think you're going to win, Nigel?
Well, I think we stand a good chance, but it's we've had our problems this morning. We had a clutch blow this morning, and I've just done the warm-up laps, and the clutch is a little bit soft, so they're working on it again now, the mechanics. Doing a great job, and we've just got to do this afternoon.
How big a disappointment is it to you that you're not in pole position for the 6th time this season?
It makes no difference at all. I mean, for all the races this year, I've been on the front row of the grid, and I think as I've demonstrated, you can win from second place as easy as from first place. So no difference at all.
Nelson can't hear this interview, so what are your tactics?
I should get shot if I told you. I can think of many nice things to do, but it's going to be basically a fuel economy race. I'm sorry to say that, but it is. We've got to watch our meters like never before. If you recall here, the last time we all raced here, Ayrton Senna dropped out 5 laps before the end in the Lotus. That's because he ran out of fuel, and we all had problems, and this is not going to be any different, unfortunately.
What about tyres here, Nigel?
Again, another crucial factor. I can honestly say and sort of hold my hands up in dismay that we don't really know whether we're going to make a stop or not. We're just going to play it by ear. We've got a countdown to lap 35, and we might stop, we might not. Depends what shape we're in.
And now, of course, the final question: are you going to win for the 3rd time on home soil?
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. For sure, I'd love to, and you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be out there, as I say in America, or I shouldn't say in America, doing my best I can. Ayrton, Nelson, Alain, and myself, I think you'll probably get the winner. Which one of us, I don't know. I know which one I hope.
Well, Nigel, as you know, we're totally unbiased. On behalf of all the BBC viewers and 100,000 fans, here's hope it's you we're interviewing in a couple of hours' time.
Thank you very much. We'll be trying. Thanks everybody out there, eh? Great, thank you.
Nigel.
Once all the talking was done, it was time to go, with Mansell moving over on Piquet off the start, but Prost going round both to take the lead going into Copse. Piquet got back past going through Beckett's, and Mansell followed through off the end of Hanger Straight. Behind Prost were Senna, Boutsen, Fabi and Alboreto. Senna moved up to 3rd at the end of the lap. Behind him, Alboreto had already got past Fabi and was challenging Boutsen. Up front, though, the 2 Williams drivers were some distance ahead after just 2 laps, having turned up the boost a bit in the opening laps, while Alboreto had now got past Boutsen as well and was approaching the rear of Senna and Prost running tightly together. Senna, in fact, seemed to be holding Prost up, and after another lap or so, Alain took the place back, just as the cameras cut away to watch Capelli's march expire with a flaming engine. So now there was a 3-car train of Prost, Senna and Alboreto, with Boutsen behind, and the gap from 2nd place Mansell to 3rd place Prost was some 6 seconds already at the end of lap 6. Behind Boutsen, Johansson had made his way up to 7th, with De Cesaris 8th and Nakajima 9th, with Berger having dropped back to 10th and Fabi back to 12th. His fuel readout had gone haywire, leaving him driving conservatively to ensure he finished. De Cesaris had another turbo fire and went out on lap 9, and Berger had already spun out off camera the previous lap. Piquet and Mansell lapped Fabre by lap 10, by which time Johansson had made his way up into the points, but with an eye on fuel consumption and tyre wear, the race had settled down into a rhythm as drivers began to play the waiting game as the 3rd distance approached. Stefan Johansson's promising drive came to an end with an engine fire on lap 19, and Patrese inherited his 6th place. By lap 26, Piquet had lapped everyone up to 8th placed Warwick already, and was bearing down on 7th placed Nakajima, and had lapped 14th placed Campos twice. Such was the enormous speed disparity between the Williamses and everyone else. At the end of his 30th lap, Prost was first in for tyres and rejoined 5th, while Piquet had arrived on the tail of Nakajima, but was held up a bit by the Japanese driver, allowing Mansell to close right up. Mansell himself was held up a little before getting through, but on lap 34 was just over a second behind when he peeled off to go into the pits. A 9.54 second stop put him back out in 2nd place still, so the big question now was whether Piquet would stop, and if so, when and how quickly. Caffi Zazella went out around the same time as Mansell's stop, the talented Italian having another decent run ended by reliability problems. Mansell, meanwhile, was going hell for leather, setting a new lap record as he chased Piquet trying to close the gap and make the most of his fresh tyres. He was taking close to a second a lap out of his teammate, but Piquet and the Williams team had decided to stay out, so the question now became how quickly Nigel could catch him. By now he was some 24 seconds behind with 22 laps to go. It was certainly going to be a tall order, as Brundle brought his Zach Speed in for his team to have a look at. Further back, Senna, also non-stopping, and 3rd was being slowly reeled in by Prost in a mirror of the battle for the lead. Cheever toured in with a smoking engine to retire from 8th as Mansell continued catching PK by just over a second a lap, setting lap record after lap record. Prost, meanwhile, seemed to be suffering some kind of problem, suddenly dropping 5 seconds back from Senna and being lapped by PK. Alboreto made a late, slow stop, then came back in a lap or so later to retire with suspension problems, just as Prost rolled to a stop with a dud tag engine. That promoted Nakajima to 4th, with Warwick and Fabi in tow and Boutsen just outside the points. And with 9 laps to go, PK's lead was now cut to 6.4 seconds, and Mansell could now see Nelson ahead of him. The sight was clearly like a red rag to Mansell's bull as he cut the lead to 3 seconds in the next lap, as PK came up to lap 3rd place Senna, who in turn was lapping his own teammate. Senna let PK through, but Mansell arrived just behind the low tie as Senna pulled out to lap Nakajima before waving Nigel through. At the end of lap 60 of 65 then, it was 1.7 seconds, but the timings were irrelevant really, as it was now all about track position. The fans were on their feet cheering Mansell on, and Nigel had turned up his boost to maximum, but he had no idea how much fuel he had left. According to his readout, he'd run out 2.5 laps ago. It didn't matter, he was going to go for it regardless. On lap 63, Mansell sold PK a dummy and dove inside at Stowe, toughing it out to take the lead, to a cheer from the stands that almost drowned out the screaming Hondas. 2 laps later, Mansell crossed the finish line to win the British Grand Prix, but only just. As the fans broke rank and swarmed the track, Red 5 spluttered to a stop out of fuel. It looked for a moment as though he might be borne back to the pits on the shoulders of the fans, but eventually a course car came to his rescue as PK climbed disconsolately out of his Williams in the Parc Fermé. His 5th second place in 7 races, but still no win on the board. Senna, himself lapped, and Nakajima made it a Honda 1-2-3-4, with Warwick picking up his first points of the year for his first finish, and Fabi picking up the final point after running a slow but steady race with an unknown quantity of fuel. Boutsen was 7th, then Palmer and Fabre 1st and 2nd in the 3.5 litre category, and Brundle still running after his repairs but unclassified 11 laps down. So, with 1 race left before the halfway mark, Senna still led the championship but only by 1 point, with Mansell and Prost equal second on 30 apiece, and Prost still in touch, just 4 points behind them. With McLaren failing to score here, Williams consolidated their already large lead in the Constructors' race, with Lotus closing to within 2 points of the Woking team. It had been a classic race and one to remember for the fans who were there, but although they were all smiles publicly after their clean sweep, for the Honda management it was the last straw. Williams' failure to restrain Mansell and order him to finish behind their man PK had come within an ace of seeing him go out with a dry tank, or even worse, colliding with PK, and put their big moment in jeopardy. Nonetheless, it had been a devastating display of Williams' superiority, and everyone else looked to the next race in West Germany in 2 weeks' time with a rather resigned air. Hockenheim was another power circuit, and right now it didn't look like anyone else could come close.